The air in the Xylar Grand Casino shimmered with an unnatural opulence, a testament to the Empire's unfathomable wealth. Gravity shifted subtly, a playful manipulation of the laws of physics designed to both disorient and titillate the senses. Exotic aromas, a blend of interstellar spices and pheromonal attractants, hung heavy in the air, mingling with the low hum of anti-gravity engines and the excited chatter of the Xylar elite. Beings from 1,000 worlds crowded around tables adorned with shimmering energy fields, wagering fortunes on everything from the outcome of nebula collapses to the mating habits of rare space-faring crustaceans. The stakes were astronomical, the losses often devastating, yet a perverse sense of entertainment permeated the atmosphere. It was a place where fortunes were won and lost on a whim, where the absurd became commonplace, and where the casual cruelty of the powerful was considered just another form of amusement. Queen Lyra, ruler of the Xylar Empire, sat regally upon a throne of polished obsidian, her gaze sweeping across the chaotic scene with an air of detached amusement. Known throughout the galaxy for her strategic brilliance and icy demeanor, Lyra was a force to be reckoned with. Yet tonight, a flicker of restlessness danced in her normally impassive eyes. Boredom, perhaps, or a subtle rebellion against the suffocating expectations of her station. Whatever the cause, it was about to manifest in a spectacularly reckless fashion. "I wager," she announced, her voice cutting through the din with effortless authority, "that I shall marry a human janitor." A stunned silence fell over the casino. The clatter of dice, the rustle of expensive fabrics, the murmur of conversations, all ceased abruptly. Every eye in the room turned towards the queen, disbelief etched on their alien faces. A human janitor? It was an unthinkable proposition, a blatant disregard for the rigid social hierarchy of the Xylar Empire. Humans were considered a primitive, unremarkable species, fit only for menial labor. The idea of their queen, a being of immense power and prestige, marrying one was beyond comprehension. Whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of amusement, shock, and a growing sense of unease. Was this a joke? A test of loyalty? Or something far more unsettling? The stakes were immediately apparent. This was not merely a personal matter. Lyra's reputation, the stability of the empire itself, hung in the balance. Lyra, unfazed by the reaction, leaned forward, a hint of steel in her voice. "The terms are simple. I shall remain married to this human for 1 Xylar year. He shall not be made aware of my true identity, at least initially. If I fail, if I cannot maintain this charade, or if the alliance dissolves before the year is complete, I shall forfeit a significant portion of my authority and holdings to the imperial treasury." A gasp echoed through the room. The implications were staggering. This was more than just a bet, it was a gamble with the very fabric of the empire. The assembled nobles exchanged nervous glances. The potential consequences were dire, but the allure of witnessing such a spectacle was undeniable. What could possibly come of this bizarre union? What secrets lay hidden beneath the queen's impulsive decision? The Xylar year stretched ahead, promising a cascade of unforeseen events. Little did they know, this seemingly trivial wager would soon unravel the very foundations of their empire, revealing the hidden strength of humanity and the surprising capacity for love in the most unexpected of places. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what the wedding night would bring. Jake was, by all accounts, an ordinary human. He wasn't exceptionally tall, devastatingly handsome, or possessed of any obviously remarkable talents. He was, in fact, a janitor. His domain was the sprawling, sterile corridors of a Xylar space station orbiting a binary star system, far, far from Earth. Day in, day out, Jake pushed his cleaning cart, the hum of its anti-grav wheels a constant companion as he mopped, polished, and scrubbed. He wasn't ambitious, not in the grand, galactic sense. He didn't dream of commanding fleets or discovering new worlds. His ambitions were smaller, more personal, a comfortable apartment back on Earth, maybe a dog, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. His routine was a monotonous cycle. Wake before dawn, grab a nutrient-paced breakfast, and begin his rounds. The same corridors, the same discarded wrappers, the same faint scent of recycled air. He'd meticulously clean the observation decks, allowing himself a brief moment to gaze at the swirling nebulae and the distant, cold stars. It was a beautiful, indifferent universe, and Jake felt a strange comfort in its vastness. He was a small cog in a massive machine, an insignificant speck against an infinite canvas. Yet, he took pride in his work, ensuring the station remained pristine, a testament to human diligence in the face of alien technology. One standard rotation, as Jake was diligently polishing a particularly stubborn stain near the hydroponics lab, he felt a presence. He looked up to see a figure observing him. She was tall, even for a Xylar, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that shimmered with an inner light. He didn't recognize her uniform, but it was clearly high-ranking. It was Queen Lyra, though Jake, of course, had no idea. She was disguised, her regal bearing subtly masked, her purpose to observe him without the weight of her title. Lyra watched Jake with a critical eye. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't seem particularly intelligent, nor did he possess the imposing physique of a Xylar warrior. He was ordinary. Utterly, disappointingly ordinary. He was a means to an end, a pawn in a game she intended to win. He was a blank slate, ready to be written upon, a tool to be wielded. She saw him as a potential embarrassment, a source of amusement for her court, but also a challenge. Could she, the queen of the Xylar Empire, mold this unassuming human into something more? Then, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a melodic chime. "I've been observing your work. You're very thorough." Jake, startled, straightened up and wiped his hands on his uniform. "Just doing my job, ma'am," he mumbled, slightly flustered by her attention. Lyra smiled, a carefully practiced expression of warmth. "I admire diligence. Tell me, Jake, are you happy with your life here?" Jake hesitated. "It's a living," he said with a shrug. "Pays the bills." Lyra paused, then spoke. "I have an offer for you. A proposition that could change your life." She tilted her head, her eyes locking with his. "I'm looking for a partner, someone to share my life with. Someone stable. Would you consider marrying me, Jake?" The words hung in the air, heavy and improbable. Jake stared at her, his mouth agape. Marry her? This beautiful, enigmatic woman, who was clearly far above his station. It was absurd, ridiculous, utterly unbelievable. Was this some kind of joke? A cruel prank orchestrated by bored Xylar technicians? He looked around, half expecting to see hidden cameras and smirking faces. But there was only Lyra, her expression serene, her eyes fixed on him. He was flattered, of course, deeply flattered. But also bewildered, suspicious. What were her motives? Was she being genuine, or was this some elaborate game? He questioned her motives, probing for any hint of deception, but was ultimately swayed by her apparent sincerity. He stammered, "Ma'am, I don't know what to say. I'm just a janitor. You could have anyone." Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft. "I don't want anyone. I want you, Jake." The wedding preparations were unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The Xylar Empire, it seemed, spared no expense when it came to celebrating a royal union, even one as unconventional as this. The palace, already a monument to alien grandeur, was further adorned with shimmering fabrics, bioluminescent flora, and gravity-defying sculptures. The air thrummed with an energy that was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. Jake, used to the quiet hum of the space station's ventilation system, found himself constantly bombarded by a symphony of alien sounds and sensations. He felt like a small boat caught in a cosmic whirlpool, struggling to stay afloat amidst the swirling currents of Xylar society. His bewilderment only intensified as the wedding day approached. Fittings for his ceremonial attire involved strange devices that scanned and molded shimmering materials to his form. He was introduced to a retinue of servants whose sole purpose seemed to be to anticipate his every need, a concept utterly foreign to his self-sufficient nature. He felt a growing sense of unreality, as if he had stepped into a fantastical dream from which he might never awaken. The sheer opulence of it all was suffocating, a stark contrast to the simple, utilitarian world he had always known. He was acutely aware of his ordinariness, his lack of sophistication, his utter unsuitability for this role. He was, after all, just a janitor. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed to glide through the preparations with effortless grace. She played the role of the loving bride to perfection, her every gesture radiating warmth and affection. She was attentive to Jake's anxieties, offering reassuring smiles and gentle words of encouragement. Yet, beneath the surface, Jake sensed a subtle undercurrent of calculation, a hint of something hidden. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was a character in a play, carefully directed to perform a specific part. He wondered what Lyra truly thought of him, what her real motivations were. The ceremony itself was a bewildering spectacle. Strange, melodic chants filled the air as Lyra and Jake stood before a towering altar of crystal and light. Alien dignitaries, their faces inscrutable, watched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Jake struggled to follow the unfamiliar rituals, mimicking Lyra's movements and repeating phrases he barely understood. He felt a profound sense of disconnect, as if he were an observer in his own life. The wedding reception was a grand affair, a dazzling display of Xylar wealth and power. Jake found himself adrift in a sea of alien faces, struggling to navigate the complex social dynamics and unfamiliar customs. He made a few clumsy but endearing attempts to connect with Lyra's family and friends, offering awkward compliments and sharing anecdotes about his life on the space station. His genuine efforts, however, were often met with polite indifference or thinly veiled amusement. He felt like an outsider, a curiosity, a specimen under observation. As the night drew to a close, Jake found himself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the sprawling palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of exotic flowers and the soft murmur of alien conversations. He felt a profound sense of isolation, a longing for the familiar comforts of his old life. He was about to embark on a journey into the unknown, a journey that could change his life forever. He prepared for the wedding night, completely unaware of the true nature of his marriage, the Empire's expectations, and the shocking revelation that awaited him. The weight of the unknown pressed down on him, heavy and inescapable. He only hoped he was up for the challenge. 667 words. The door hissed open, revealing a honeymoon suite that could only be described as palatial, even by Xyler standards. Jake stepped inside, his jaw slack. Holographic waterfalls cascaded down shimmering walls, the air subtly scented with exotic flora he couldn't even name. The bed, if it could be called that, was a levitating platform draped in fabrics that looked like spun starlight. Control panels glowed with cryptic symbols, promising experiences beyond his wildest imagination, or perhaps, beyond his comprehension altogether. It was all a bit much, overwhelming in its sheer extravagance. This wasn't just luxury, it was an alien concept of luxury, far removed from the simple comforts he knew. He felt a pang of unease, a sense of being completely out of his depth. He was just a janitor, after all. What was he doing in a place like this? Lyra entered behind him, a serene smile gracing her lips. She seemed perfectly at ease in this environment, as if she belonged here, which, of course, she did. She closed the door behind them, the soft whoosh echoing in the vastness of the suite. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of amusement and something else. Pity? Concern? He couldn't quite decipher it. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something. Jake, she began, her voice unusually soft, there's something I need to explain to you. He braced himself. He had a feeling this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. She weaved a tale, carefully constructed to reveal some truth, but obscure the biggest part. She was a noblewoman, she said, caught in a web of political intrigue. A forced marriage loomed, a union designed to consolidate power and wealth, but one she desperately wanted to avoid. She had run away, seeking refuge in anonymity. She needed someone to help her maintain a low profile, someone unsuspecting who would not ask too many questions. That's where he came in. It was a flimsy story, full of holes, but delivered with such conviction that Jake found himself believing it, at least in part. He wanted to believe it. Jake listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. He was surprised, of course, but also strangely understanding. He wasn't quite sure why she'd chosen him, but he couldn't deny a swell of admiration for her courage. To defy her family, to risk everything for her freedom, it was a bold move. So, that's why you married me? He asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and curiosity. To hide? He rubbed the back of his neck, still trying to process everything. Lyra nodded, her eyes pleading. I know it's a lot to take in, Jake, she said, and I understand if you're angry. But I promise you, I wouldn't ask this of you if I didn't trust you completely. An idea sparked in Jake's mind, something simple and genuine. He walked over to Lyra, took her hand, and held it gently. He looked her in the eyes, a sincerity that was uniquely his. I may not understand all the politics and noble stuff, he said, but I know what it's like to feel trapped. If you need my help, I'll do what I can. He squeezed her hand gently, a gesture of support and solidarity. Lyra was taken aback. She expected anger, resentment, perhaps even fear. But she saw none of those things in Jake's eyes. Instead, she saw kindness, compassion, and a willingness to help, despite the circumstances. It was a simple gesture, a small act of human decency, but it struck her with unexpected force. It challenged her preconceived notions about humans, about their simplicity and lack of sophistication. A queen married to a janitor became something more complex. It was a revelation, leaving her wondering what impact Jake's simple act of kindness would have on their marriage and the future. Word count, 667. Jake attempted to adapt to his new, utterly bizarre life as he wasn't quite sure what he was. Consort seemed closest, but it felt incredibly pretentious coming from a guy who used to unclog space toilets for a living. The palace was a symphony of polished chrome, shimmering energy fields, and hovering servitors, all orchestrated with a level of technology that made his head spin. He missed the comforting simplicity of his old mop and bucket. He missed the quiet solitude of the maintenance corridors. Now, he was surrounded by luxury he couldn't comprehend and servants who seemed to regard him with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. Navigating the cultural differences proved to be a monumental challenge. He'd accidentally insulted a visiting dignitary by complimenting their iridescent scales, apparently a faux pas of epic proportions. He'd also managed to set off a high-security alert by trying to brew coffee in what turned out to be a delicate energy regulator. The Xyler's penchant for consuming solidified nebula dust for breakfast was something he simply couldn't wrap his head around, no matter how hard he tried. Lyra, bless her heart, was trying her best to guide him through this bewildering maze of alien etiquette. She patiently explained the intricacies of Xyler's social hierarchies, the proper way to address a grand luminary, and the importance of never, ever, touching the Emperor's ceremonial plasma orb. She was surprisingly adept at explaining things in a way he could understand, breaking down complex concepts into digestible chunks. He found himself admiring her intelligence and her patience, even as he struggled to keep up. The palace staff, initially frosty and dismissive, were slowly starting to warm up to him. His genuine attempts to learn their customs, his unfailing politeness, and his surprising knack for fixing malfunctioning droids had begun to chip away at their skepticism. He even managed to win over the head chef by suggesting a new way to prepare a particularly pungent species of space fungus, a culinary triumph that earned him grudging respect and a surprisingly delicious lunch. But beneath the glittering surface of royal life, Jake sensed something was amiss. He caught glimpses of hushed conversations, furtive glances, and a palpable undercurrent of tension. Lyra's enemies, those who had scoffed at the bet and resented her power, were watching him closely. They saw him as a potential weakness, a naive outsider who could be manipulated or exploited to undermine the queen. He started noticing subtle acts of sabotage, veiled threats disguised as polite conversation, and a constant feeling of being observed. He knew that he was being tested, that he was walking a tightrope over a pit of political vipers. He realized that being a consort wasn't just about attending lavish banquets and learning alien etiquette. It was about navigating a treacherous landscape of power, intrigue, and ancient rivalries. And despite his humble beginnings, despite his lack of experience, Jake was determined to protect Lyra, to prove that he was more than just a pawn in a cosmic game. He was starting to understand the true stakes of this marriage, and he was ready to play his part. Though, he had a feeling that he would need to begin thinking like an alien himself. The smallest sign was the most significant of all. A hidden glint within the eyes of one of the palace guards. It said more than the guard wished for it to say. Jake now had his suspicions. Word count, 667. Shared moments blossomed between Jake and Lyra, unexpected and precious. They found themselves lingering in the royal gardens, the alien flora casting long, ethereal shadows as they spoke. Jake, ever the observer, would point out the subtle differences between Xyler plant life and the familiar greenery of Earth, his descriptions laced with a gentle wonder that charmed Lyra. She, in turn, would explain the complex symbiotic relationships between the plants and the creatures that inhabited them, revealing a deep understanding of her planet's delicate ecosystem. These quiet moments became a sanctuary, a place where they could escape the pressures of royal life and simply be themselves. He would recount stories of his childhood, growing up in a small town, working odd jobs, and dreaming of something more. She listened intently, fascinated by the simplicity and normalcy of his upbringing, a stark contrast to her own life of privilege and responsibility. Lyra, the formidable queen, began to shed her armor, revealing glimpses of vulnerability that surprised even herself. She confessed her anxieties about leading the Xyler Empire, the weight of expectations that pressed down upon her, and the constant fear of making a wrong decision that could have devastating consequences. She spoke of her loneliness, the isolation that came with being the ultimate authority, and the difficulty of trusting anyone when everyone had an agenda. Jake, with his unassuming demeanor and genuine empathy, offered her a safe space to unburden herself, a listening ear without judgment or ulterior motives. He reminded her of her strengths, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to her people. He encouraged her to trust her instincts and to believe in her ability to navigate the challenges ahead. He didn't offer solutions or advice, but simply listened and validated her feelings, providing a comfort she had never known before. Both Jake and Lyra found themselves challenging their preconceived notions about each other and their respective species. Lyra, who had initially viewed humans as primitive and insignificant, began to appreciate their resilience, their ingenuity, and their capacity for kindness. She saw in Jake a strength that transcended physical power, a quiet determination that allowed him to overcome any obstacle. Jake, who had grown up with a romanticized view of alien civilizations, learned that even the most advanced societies had their flaws, their inequalities, and their internal conflicts. He saw in Lyra a leader who was struggling to do what was right, a queen who was willing to challenge the status quo and fight for a better future. The Xylar Empire, or at least its ruling factions, watched with growing unease as Lyra and Jake's relationship deepened. Some saw it as a threat to the established order, a destabilizing force that could undermine the empire's traditions and hierarchies. Others, more pragmatic, saw it as a potential source of strength, a unique opportunity to bridge the gap between two vastly different cultures. Whispers circulated through the palace corridors, rumors of a human influence corrupting the queen, or a strategic alliance that could reshape the galaxy. The political climate grew tense, the air thick with suspicion and intrigue. The stakes were rising, and the game was about to change. But beneath the surface, something more sinister was brewing. An ominous sign, a subtle shift in the balance of power, hinted that the political intrigue was about to escalate. A clandestine meeting between high-ranking officials, a hushed conversation overheard in the royal gardens, a coded message intercepted by a trusted advisor, all pointed to a growing conspiracy, a plot to undermine Lyra's authority and seize control of the empire. The shadows were lengthening, and Jake and Lyra were unknowingly walking into danger, their growing connection a beacon for those who sought to exploit their vulnerability. The storm was coming, and its fury would test the strength of their bond and the fate of the entire Xylar Empire. 665 words. Jake witnessed firsthand the stark inequalities woven into the fabric of the Xylar Empire. The gilded surfaces and technological marvels masked a deep chasm between the privileged elite and the struggling masses. He saw it in the weary faces of the sanitation workers, toiling endlessly beneath the gleaming cities. He observed it in the restricted access to resources, where the opulent feasted while others barely scraped by. The casual indifference with which the upper classes treated those beneath them chilled him. The vibrant, pulsating heart of the empire throbbed with a hidden sickness. It was a disease of disparity, of blatant injustice that gnawed at his conscience. His human sensibilities, honed on Earth's own turbulent history, recoiled at the blatant exploitation. Back home, he'd seen inequality, but nothing on this scale, nothing so deeply ingrained in the societal structure. The sheer magnitude of it was staggering. He couldn't simply stand by, basking in royal comforts, while others suffered. He had to do something, anything, to alleviate their plight. The seeds of rebellion began to sprout within him. A quiet, persistent whisper urging him to act. Subtly, cautiously, Jake began to use his position as Lyra's consort to advocate for change. During formal dinners, he'd steer conversations towards the plight of the lower classes, highlighting their contributions and their struggles. He'd share anecdotes, painting vivid pictures of their lives and their needs. He did this carefully, making sure to never directly criticize the empire or its leaders, but rather, gently nudging them towards empathy and understanding. He spoke of fair wages, access to education, and basic health care, concepts that seemed revolutionary in this stratified society. Lyra found herself in a difficult position. On one hand, she was the queen, bound by duty to uphold the traditions and structures of the Xylar Empire. On the other hand, she was increasingly drawn to Jake's ideals and his unwavering commitment to justice. She knew that his influence was shaking things up, challenging the established order, and potentially threatening her reign. But she also recognized the truth in his words, the undeniable moral imperative to create a more equitable society. A profound dilemma began to weigh on her, forcing her to confront the contradictions within herself and the empire she ruled. Meanwhile, whispers of a resistance movement circulated in the shadows, a group of Xylar rebels who fought for social justice. They saw in Jake a potential ally, a powerful voice within the palace walls who could expose the empire's corruption and champion their cause. They watched him, studied his actions, and debated whether to approach him. The risks were high. Exposure could mean imprisonment, or worse. But the potential rewards were even greater. An alliance with the Queen's consort could be the key to igniting a revolution. One night, under the cover of darkness, the rebels made contact. A clandestine meeting was arranged, shrouded in secrecy and fraught with tension. They presented Jake with evidence of the Empire's most egregious offenses, the exploitation of resources, the suppression of dissent, the systematic oppression of the lower classes. They pleaded with him to join their cause, to use his influence to bring about real change. Jake listened intently, his heart pounding in his chest. He was faced with a monumental decision. Should he betray the Empire, the very institution that had embraced him? Or should he remain loyal to Lyra, the woman he had come to love, even if it meant condoning injustice? The weight of the galaxy seemed to rest upon his shoulders. His choice would determine the fate of the Xylar Empire and his own destiny. 667 words. Jake decided to secretly ally himself with the Xylar rebels. It wasn't a decision he came to lightly. He spent sleepless nights wrestling with the implications, the potential for betrayal, the sheer audacity of going against an empire. He knew the risks were astronomical, not just to himself, but to Lyra, to the fragile peace they had somehow managed to cultivate amidst the alien grandeur. Yet, the faces of the oppressed, the stories of injustice he had witnessed firsthand, haunted him. He couldn't simply stand by and watch as an entire civilization suffered under the weight of corruption. He believed it was the right thing to do, even if it meant risking his life and, perhaps even more terrifying, his relationship with Lyra. The weight of this secret pressed down on him, a constant, gnawing anxiety. He was no longer just a janitor who had stumbled into a royal marriage, he was a double agent, a clandestine player in a game with galaxy-altering stakes. The clandestine meetings between Jake and the rebels were fraught with tension. They took place in the hidden corners of the palace, in forgotten maintenance tunnels and abandoned chambers, always under the cloak of darkness and the constant fear of discovery. The rebels themselves were a motley crew, a diverse group of Xylar citizens united by their shared desire for a better future. There was Zara, a former scientist who had been ostracized for her dissenting views, Kalen, a skilled technician who could bypass any security system, and Rix, a charismatic leader with a fiery passion for justice. They discussed strategies for exposing the Empire's corruption, for dismantling the systems of oppression, for promoting social change that would benefit all Xylar citizens, not just the elite. Jake, with his outsider perspective and his unique access to the inner workings of the palace, became an invaluable asset to their cause. Jake used his access to the palace, his seemingly innocuous position as Lyra's consort, to gather evidence of the Empire's wrongdoings. He meticulously documented instances of corruption, of resource exploitation, of the blatant disregard for the well-being of the lower classes. He risked everything, sneaking into restricted areas, copying sensitive files, all while maintaining the facade of a clueless, unassuming human. The pressure was immense, the fear of exposure a constant companion. He knew that if he were caught, the consequences would be dire, not only for him but also for the rebels and potentially for Lyra as well. Lyra, perceptive and intelligent, began to suspect that Jake was hiding something from her. She noticed his secretive behavior, his late-night excursions, his growing involvement in political matters that were far beyond his supposed understanding. She saw the strain in his eyes, the worry etched on his face. She knew that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Her trust in him, once absolute, began to waver, replaced by a growing unease and a nagging sense of betrayal. One evening, Lyra confronted Jake, demanding to know what he'd been up to. Her voice was laced with a mixture of anger and concern. The carefully constructed facade that Jake had been maintaining began to crumble under the weight of her gaze. He knew he couldn't keep the truth from her any longer. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Jake took a deep breath and decided to reveal his alliance with the rebels to Lyra, hoping that she would understand his motives, that she would see the justice in his actions. He laid bare his soul, explaining his reasons for joining the rebellion, his commitment to fighting for a better future for the Xylar people. He watched her face intently, searching for any sign of understanding, any glimmer of hope. 667 words. Lyra stared at Jake, the weight of the Empire pressing down on her shoulders. His revelation hung in the air, thick and suffocating like the atmosphere on a dying planet. Betrayal stung, a venomous serpent coiling around her heart. This wasn't just a political misstep, it was a personal wound, inflicted by the one person she had dared to trust, to perhaps even love. She replayed their shared moments in her mind, each laugh, each touch, each whispered confidence now tainted with the bitter taste of deceit. Had it all been a charade? Was his affection merely a calculated maneuver in his grand scheme of rebellion? Conflicting loyalties tore at her soul. The Xylar Empire, with its ancient traditions and rigid structure, demanded unwavering fealty. She was its queen, its protector, its guiding star. Yet, Jake had awakened something within her, a yearning for justice, a desire to dismantle the very system she was sworn to uphold. He had shown her the suffering of the oppressed, the corruption festering beneath the gilded surface of the empire. Could she simply ignore the truth he had unveiled, even if it meant betraying her people? The news of Jake's alliance with the rebels reached the Imperial Council like a shockwave. Demands for his immediate capture and execution echoed through the halls of power. The senators, a collective of hawkish and self-serving beings, saw this as an opportunity to solidify their own positions, to purge any hint of dissent. They pressured Lyra relentlessly, reminding her of her duty, her lineage, her responsibility to maintain order. Each word was a hammer blow, chipping away at her resolve. Lyra knew she had to act, and she had to act decisively. The fate of the Empire, perhaps even the galaxy, hung in the balance. With a heavy heart, she made her decision. In a public address broadcast across the Xylar network, Lyra denounced Jake as a traitor, a manipulator, a dangerous element threatening the stability of the realm. Her words were cold, calculated, devoid of any emotion. She ordered his immediate arrest, branding him an enemy of the state. The Imperial Guard descended upon Jake, their energy weapons humming with lethal intent. He offered no resistance, his eyes fixed on Lyra as they dragged him away. There was a flicker of understanding, perhaps even forgiveness, in his gaze. As the cell door slammed shut, echoing through the cold, metallic corridors of the prison, Jake was left alone with his thoughts, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He wondered if he had misjudged Lyra, if his trust had been misplaced. Had he sacrificed everything for a lost cause? Had he condemned them both? Doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Had Lyra truly betrayed him, or was she playing a deeper game, a game he couldn't yet comprehend? Was her public denouncement a necessary sacrifice, a calculated move to protect him from the Empire's wrath? Or had he simply been a pawn in her elaborate scheme, a tool to be used and discarded when he had served his purpose? The question swirled within him, a tempest of uncertainty threatening to drown him in despair. Only time would tell the true extent of the Queen's betrayal, or the depths of her deception. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what the Queen would do next. Jake sat in the cold, sterile cell, the metal biting into his skin. The stark reality of his imprisonment had begun to sink in. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of meager meals and echoing silence. He replayed the events leading up to his arrest, Lyra's face a mask of cold determination as she publicly denounced him. Had he misjudged her? Was their connection a mere illusion, a fleeting moment of warmth in the vast emptiness of space? Doubt gnawed at him, threatening to consume the hope he desperately clung to. He tried to rationalize her actions, searching for any sign that her betrayal was not genuine. Perhaps she was protecting him, as illogical as that seemed. The thought was a lifeline, however fragile. Then, one night, the heavy door hissed open. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked and silent. Jake tensed, bracing for the worst. As the figure approached, a familiar scent filled the air, a subtle blend of exotic spices and otherworldly flora. It was Lyra. Relief washed over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. But her expression was grave, her eyes filled with a sorrow that mirrored his own. She moved with a furtiveness that spoke volumes about the risks she was taking. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the prison's ventilation system. "I had to come. You deserve an explanation." She explained her public denouncement, framing it as a necessary deception to protect him from the full wrath of the Xylar Empire. It was a risky gambit, designed to buy them time and allow her to operate from within. She was walking a tightrope, she confessed, one wrong step could plunge them both into oblivion. Then came the revelation that shook Jake to his core. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am Queen Lyra of the Xylar Empire." The weight of those words crashed down on him, crushing his previous understanding of their relationship. Everything he thought he knew was a lie, a carefully constructed facade. He was not married to a noblewoman fleeing a political marriage, he was married to the most powerful being in the galaxy. He struggled to reconcile the woman he had come to love with the regal figure who now stood before him. Yet, beneath the shock and confusion, a glimmer of understanding began to emerge. He saw the immense pressure she was under, the impossible choices she had to make. He knew she had been trapped by duty and tradition. Her actions, however misguided, were born of a desire to protect her people. He saw how much she cared. Lyra continued, outlining her plan to expose the Empire's corruption and implement social reforms. She had been gathering evidence for years, carefully building a case against the corrupt officials who were exploiting the Xylar people. She needed Jake's help, his unique perspective and unwavering moral compass. Together, they could bring about real change, create a just and equitable society. He looked at her, the queen who had become his wife, the alien who had captured his heart. He saw her strength, her vulnerability, and her unwavering commitment to justice. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued him began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice filled with determination. A faint smile touched Lyra's lips. "First, we get you out of here." Hope flickered in the darkness, a beacon guiding them toward an uncertain future. The odds were stacked against them, the risks were immense, but they had each other, and they had a cause worth fighting for. The Queen and the Janitor against the Empire. Word count, 667. Lyra orchestrated Jake's escape from his prison cell with meticulous planning, ensuring every detail was accounted for. She provided him with a small but dedicated team of loyalists within the palace guard, individuals who had long questioned the emperor's increasingly tyrannical rule and were sympathetic to the rebellion's cause. These allies, disguised as routine security personnel, guided Jake through the labyrinthine corridors of the prison complex, bypassing surveillance systems and avoiding detection. He was provided with a simple, nondescript uniform, allowing him to blend in with the lower-level staff and further reducing the risk of being recognized. Once outside the prison walls, Jake was met by a small transport ship, piloted by another rebel sympathizer. The ship, a battered freighter typically used for hauling supplies, quickly whisked him away to a hidden rendezvous point on the outskirts of the capital city. Upon arriving at the rendezvous, Jake was reunited with key members of the Xylar Rebellion. He was greeted with a mixture of relief and admiration. His escape had been a risky gambit, but it had also served as a powerful symbol of hope for the oppressed masses of the Empire. Now free from his confinement, Jake immediately threw himself into the rebellion's cause, eager to contribute his unique skills and perspective. He possesses an innate understanding of human nature, coupled with his newfound knowledge of Xylar society, making him a valuable asset. His first act was to establish a secure communication channel with Lyra, allowing them to coordinate their efforts and share vital intelligence. This link was crucial, as Lyra, still posing as the Queen, remained the rebellion's most valuable inside source. Leveraging Lyra's access to classified information and his own growing network of rebel contacts, Jake started rallying support for their cause. He traveled in secret throughout the Empire, speaking to disgruntled citizens, disillusioned soldiers, and oppressed workers. He emphasized the need for change and highlighted the Emperor's corruption and cruelty. His message resonated with many, who were tired of living under the Emperor's iron fist. Jake's speeches were not filled with fiery rhetoric or empty promises. Instead, he spoke with honesty, compassion, and a clear vision for a more just and equitable society. His words inspired hope and ignited a spark of rebellion in the hearts of those who had long felt powerless. The rebels then devised a daring plan, one that would expose the Emperor's wrongdoings to the entire galaxy, sparking a revolution that would shake the foundations of the Xylar Empire. They aimed to broadcast irrefutable evidence of the Emperor's crimes, his exploitation of resources, his oppression of minority groups, and his secret alliances with unsavory galactic entities, across all communication channels. To achieve this, they needed to gain access to the Empire's central broadcasting hub, a heavily guarded facility located deep within the capital city. This facility was the nerve center of the Empire's propaganda machine. Finally, the rebels, utilizing advanced technology, started broadcasting their message throughout the galaxy. The message contained irrefutable evidence, gathered meticulously by Jake and his allies, detailing the Emperor's crimes. The Empire, now fully aware of the threat, went on high alert, mobilizing its forces and preparing for a potential uprising. The stage was set for a final confrontation, a battle that would determine the fate of the Xylar Empire and the future of its people. The tension was palpable, hanging heavy in the air like an approaching storm. Word count, 667. The broadcast reverberated across the galactic networks, a tidal wave of truth crashing against the shores of carefully constructed lies. Images, once confined to encrypted servers and whispered conversations, now blazed across every screen, every viewport, every datapad in the known galaxy. The opulent palaces, built on the backs of exploited workers. The clandestine meetings where corrupt officials plotted to hoard resources. The stark contrast between the glittering lives of the elite and the grinding poverty of the masses. It was all there, laid bare for everyone to see. The initial reaction was a stunned silence. For generations, the Xylar Empire had cultivated an image of benevolent leadership, of unparalleled prosperity, of unwavering stability. Now, that carefully constructed facade was crumbling before their very eyes. Doubts, long suppressed by propaganda and fear, began to surface. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into open debate. The Empire, caught off guard, scrambled to control the narrative. Official pronouncements denounced the broadcast as fabricated lies, the work of disgruntled rebels and rogue elements seeking to destabilize the realm. But the evidence was too compelling, the testimonies too numerous, the images too damning. The cracks in the Empire's armor widened, revealing the rot beneath. Internal conflict erupted like a dormant volcano. Factions within the ruling elite, sensing the shifting tides, began to jockey for position. Some remained loyal to the old regime, clinging to power and privilege. Others saw an opportunity to seize control, promising reform while secretly plotting their own ascent. The political landscape became a treacherous minefield, where alliances shifted with the wind and betrayal lurked around every corner. Then, Lyra spoke. Queen Lyra, the woman who had seemingly betrayed her people, the woman who had married a human janitor on a whim, the woman who now stood at the precipice of either saving her empire or condemning it to oblivion. Her image filled every screen, her voice echoing across the galaxy. She did not deny the evidence. She did not offer excuses. She spoke with a raw honesty that resonated with the hearts of her people. She acknowledged the corruption, the inequality, the injustices that had festered within the empire for far too long. She condemned the actions of those who had abused their power, who had enriched themselves at the expense of others. But she also offered a vision of hope, a promise of a better future. She called for unity, for compassion, for a collective effort to rebuild the empire on a foundation of justice and equality. She pledged to dismantle the old structures of power, to empower the marginalized, to create a society where every citizen had the opportunity to thrive. Her words were a spark, igniting a flame of hope in the hearts of countless Xylar citizens. People who had long felt powerless, forgotten, and ignored. They rallied to her side, drawn by her sincerity and her vision. Lyra's speech was a turning point. It galvanized the rebellion, transforming it from a fringe movement into a powerful force for change. Soldiers abandoned their posts, bureaucrats resigned their positions, ordinary citizens took to the streets, demanding reform. The empire was teetering on the brink of collapse, but now, a new dawn was breaking. The rebels, bolstered by this surge of support, began to mobilize. They organized into disciplined units, trained in combat and strategy. They secured vital resources, established communication networks, and prepared for the final confrontation with the forces of the old regime. The air crackled with anticipation, with a sense of both hope and dread. The future of the Xylar Empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. The gears of war began to grind, the stage was set, and the final act was about to begin. The mobilization was complete, the lines were drawn, and the galaxy held its breath. 669 words. The battle for the Xylar Empire had begun, a maelstrom of energy blasts and clashing ideologies ripping through the once pristine cityscape. Loyalists, clad in shimmering, obsidian armor, fought with a ferocity born of desperation, clinging to the old ways, the old power structures that had benefited them for generations. Against them stood the rebels, a diverse coalition of Xylar citizens, disenfranchised workers, and even some disillusioned members of the aristocracy, all united under the banner of reform and equality. Jake, no longer just a janitor but a symbol of hope, moved through the chaos with a surprising grace. He wasn't a warrior by nature, but he possessed a quick mind and an unwavering resolve, traits that had proven more valuable than any combat training. He coordinated troop movements, identified weak points in the enemy lines, and even managed to disarm a few heavily armed loyalists with nothing more than a well-placed EMP grenade scavenged from a downed drone. Lyra, resplendent in her royal armor, led the charge from the front. Her energy blade crackled with power as she cut through ranks of loyalists, her every move a testament to her skill and determination. But even her strength was being tested. The loyalists were well equipped and heavily entrenched, and the battle showed no signs of slowing down. The tide began to turn when Jake, utilizing his knowledge of the city's underbelly, led a small squad of rebels through the sewers, emerging behind the main loyalist force. Their surprise attack disrupted the enemy's formation, creating an opening for Lyra to exploit. With a renewed surge of energy, she pressed the attack, driving the loyalists back towards the Emperor's palace. The fighting was brutal, with casualties on both sides. Jake witnessed firsthand the horrors of war, the senseless loss of life, the destruction of everything he and Lyra were fighting to protect. But he refused to be deterred. He knew that the future of the Xylar Empire, and perhaps the galaxy, depended on their victory. As they pushed closer to the palace, they encountered the Emperor's elite guard, a force of highly trained warriors augmented with advanced cybernetics. These were the most formidable opponents they had faced yet, and the battle raged with renewed intensity. Lyra engaged the guard's commander in a duel, a whirlwind of energy blades and lightning-fast strikes. Jake, meanwhile, focused on disrupting the guard's ranks, using his EMP grenades and quick thinking to disable their cybernetic enhancements. He knew that the fate of the rebellion, the fate of Lyra, rested on his shoulders. He had to succeed. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the rebels broke through the Emperor's guard, reaching the palace gates. The Emperor, realizing that his reign was coming to an end, emerged from the palace, surrounded by his remaining loyalists. He was a frail, withered figure, his face contorted with rage and desperation. He unleashed a torrent of energy blasts at Lyra, but she deflected them with her blade, advancing towards him with unwavering determination. The final confrontation was swift and decisive. Lyra disarmed the Emperor, forcing him to his knees. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with hatred and regret. The emperor's defeat signaled the end of the old regime, the end of corruption and oppression. A wave of jubilation swept through the rebel forces, their cheers echoing through the ravaged city. The battle was won. The Xylar Empire was free. 667 words. Lyra and Jake began the monumental task of rebuilding the Xylar Empire. The devastation from the rebellion was widespread, affecting not only the infrastructure but also the very fabric of Xylar society. Ancient prejudices and inequalities had been laid bare, and the task ahead was to create a truly just and equitable civilization. Lyra, now secure in her position but humbled by the experience, channeled her strategic brilliance into policymaking. Jake, with his unassuming demeanor and genuine empathy, became her most trusted advisor, a voice for the common people, and a constant reminder of the humanity that often eluded the Xylar elite. Their first act was to dismantle the old power structures, redistributing wealth and resources to the previously marginalized populations. This was met with resistance from some of the old guard, but Lyra, with Jake by her side, stood firm. They implemented programs to educate and empower the lower classes, providing opportunities for advancement that had previously been denied. Jake, drawing on his own experiences, championed initiatives that fostered creativity and innovation, recognizing that true progress came not from rigid hierarchies but from the collective intelligence of all citizens. The Xylar Empire, under their combined leadership, began to transform into a beacon of hope for the galaxy. Other civilizations, inspired by their example, started to question their own systems of governance and social justice. Trade flourished, cultural exchange blossomed, and a new era of cooperation dawned. Jake's influence permeated every aspect of Xylar society. He introduced concepts like universal health care, environmental protection, and animal rights, ideas that were revolutionary to the Xylar mindset. He taught them the importance of compassion, empathy, and the value of every living being, regardless of their social status or origin. Lyra often reflected on the improbable circumstances that had brought them together. What began as a frivolous bet had blossomed into a love story that reshaped an empire and inspired a galaxy. She realized that her initial perception of humans as insignificant and easily manipulated was profoundly wrong. Jake had shown her the true strength of humanity, their resilience, their ingenuity, and their unwavering capacity for kindness. He had challenged her assumptions, broadened her perspective, and made her a better ruler and a better person. The once icy queen now radiated warmth and compassion, her strategic mind tempered by Jake's gentle heart. Their love story became a legend, whispered in hushed tones across the Xylar Empire and beyond. It was a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of fighting for what is right, and the transformative potential of love. The Xylar Empire, once known for its ruthless ambition and cold efficiency, became a symbol of hope and progress, a testament to the unlikely union of a human janitor and an alien queen, an era of prosperity and peace finally descending on their world. 670 words. And so, the tapestry of the Xylar Empire was forever changed, woven with threads of human compassion and alien resilience. The tale serves as a vibrant reminder that even the most ordinary among us possess the capacity for extraordinary deeds, that empathy can bridge the widest chasms of difference, and that love can blossom in the most unexpected of places. Jake, the unassuming janitor, stood as a testament to the boundless potential that resides within the human spirit. He was not a warrior, nor a scholar, nor a ruler, yet he became a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope in a galaxy often shrouded in darkness. His journey from scrubbing floors to shaping the destiny of an empire was a testament to the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their station in life. He proved that kindness and integrity are weapons more powerful than any laser cannon, and that a genuine heart can conquer even the most formidable of adversaries. Lyra, the once icy queen, underwent a profound transformation, melting under the warmth of Jake's unwavering affection and learning to embrace the very qualities she had once deemed weaknesses. She discovered that true strength lies not in wielding power, but in wielding compassion, and that a leader's greatest responsibility is to serve the needs of their people. Her reign became synonymous with justice and equality, a stark contrast to the corruption and oppression that had plagued the empire for centuries. She embraced Jake's human values, weaving them into the very fabric of Xylar society, creating a world where every citizen was valued and respected. Their love story, a tale of two souls from vastly different worlds finding solace and strength in each other, became a legend whispered throughout the galaxies. It was a symbol of unity in a universe often fractured by prejudice and conflict, a reminder that differences should be celebrated, not feared. Their bond transcended species, culture, and societal expectations, proving that love is a universal language that can be understood by all. It was a beacon of hope, inspiring countless others to look beyond superficial differences and embrace the shared humanity that binds us all together. In the end, The bet that had sparked their improbable union became a distant memory, a humorous anecdote in the grand saga of their lives. Lyra often reflected on the impulsive wager, acknowledging that it was the best mistake she had ever made. It was a gamble that had not only transformed her own life, but it also reshaped the destiny of an entire empire. The Xylar Empire flourished under their joint leadership, becoming a shining example of what could be achieved when compassion and justice prevailed. As the credits roll on this incredible story, let us carry its message with us. Let us remember that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple outwards, creating waves of positive change. Let us strive to emulate Jake's unwavering integrity and Lyra's newfound compassion. Humanity, though small on the galactic stage, has a unique capacity for empathy and innovation. We have the power to contribute positively to the universe, to build bridges instead of walls, and to create a future where peace and understanding reign supreme. The story of Jake and Lyra is a testament to that potential. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of human ingenuity and heroism in the face of the unknown. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. And be sure to click on the video on your screen now for another amazing story. You won't be disappointed. 667 words.